Two identical F-150s. Same engine, same trim, same driver. One ran on the cheapest regular gas we could find for 50,000 miles. The other ran exclusively on premium. We pulled both engines apart, sent oil samples to a lab, and put both trucks on a dyno. What we found flips almost everything you have been told about gas station fuel, and it's going to change what you put in your tank forever. I have spent over a decade running fleet vehicles and testing fuel systems, and the cheap gas versus premium gas argument comes up constantly. Everyone has an opinion, almost nobody has actual data, so we built a real test. Two 2021 F-150s with the 5.0-liter V8, purchased the same week, driven by the same routes, serviced on the same schedule. The only difference was what went into the tank. 50,000 miles later, the results surprised even me, and the truck that won wasn't the one either of us expected. Let us get into what we actually found. Before we get into the results, you need to understand what you're actually paying for at the pump, because most people get this completely wrong. Premium and regular gasoline aren't different qualities of fuel. They're different octane ratings. Regular is typically 87 octane, mid-grade sits around 89, and premium is 91 to 93 depending on your region. Octane isn't a measure of energy content or cleanliness. It's a measure of how resistant the fuel is to detonating under pressure before the spark plug fires. Higher compression engines and turbocharged engines that run more boost need higher octane to prevent that early detonation, which is called KNOC. Your standard 5-liter V8 F-150 has a compression ratio designed around 87 octane. Ford engineers tuned it that way on purpose. Unless you're running the Raptor with the twin-turbo EcoBoost, or you're towing near max capacity in extreme heat, that engine has no mechanical reason to want higher octane fuel. This is the first thing almost every truck owner gets wrong, and it's the reason we structured this test the way we did. For our test trucks, we did not just buy regular and premium from any station. We controlled for a second variable that turned out to matter far more than octane, and that is top-tier certification. Top Tier is a fuel standard created by a group of automakers, including Ford, General Motors, Toyota, and BMW, that sets a higher minimum requirement for detergent additives than the federal government mandates. Every gallon of gasoline sold in the US is required by the EPA to contain some detergent, but the federal minimum is low enough that it barely does anything to prevent buildup on intake valves and fuel injectors. Top-tier retailers voluntarily add significantly more detergent, in some cases 3 to 5 times the federal minimum. Truck 1 in our test ran on the cheapest 87 octane regular we could find from a discount station that is not top-tier certified. Truck 2 ran on premium fuel from a major top-tier retailer. This meant we were actually testing two variables stacked together, low octane and low detergent versus high octane and high detergent, which is exactly how most drivers experience the cheap versus premium decision in real life. We tracked fuel economy every single fill-up across all 50,000 miles. The premium truck averaged 19.8 miles per gallon combined. The cheap gas truck averaged 19.6 miles per gallon combined. That is a difference of about 1%, well within the range of normal variation you would see from tire pressure, weather, or driving style. Premium fuel does contain roughly 1 to 2% more energy per gallon in some formulations, but for a naturally aspirated V8 not designed to take advantage of higher octane, that difference essentially disappeared into the noise. If fuel economy was the only thing you cared about, this test alone would tell you premium is a waste of money on a standard F-150. But fuel economy was not where the real story showed up. At 25,000 miles, we pulled both trucks in for a full inspection, including a borescope camera down into the intake ports to look directly at the valves. This is where things got interesting. The truck running the non-top-tier cheap gas showed visible carbon deposits building up on the intake valves, a light but noticeable coating that you could see clearly on camera. The top-tier premium truck's valves looked essentially clean, with only the faintest discoloration. Now, the 5.0-liter Ford engine uses port fuel injection combined with direct injection, which actually helps reduce this problem compared to engines that rely on direct injection alone, because port injectors spray fuel directly onto the back of the intake valves, and the detergents in that fuel wash across them. On a pure direct injection engine, this carbon buildup problem would have been dramatically worse on the cheap gas truck, because fuel never touches the valves at all in that design. But even with Ford's hybrid injection system helping matters, the detergent difference was visible with our own eyes at 25,000 miles. By 50,000 miles, that gap had grown. We pulled the intake manifold off both trucks and inspected the valves directly, not just through a camera. The cheap gas truck had moderate carbon deposits on the intake valves, the kind of buildup that technicians typically start seeing on direct injection engines that never use top-tier fuel. It was not severe enough to cause a check engine light or a rough idle yet, but a compression test showed cylinder-to-cylinder variation about 4% higher than the premium truck, which is an early indicator of restricted airflow from valve deposits. The premium truck's valves remained close to factory clean. We also pulled the fuel injectors from both trucks and had them flow tested. The injectors from the cheap gas truck showed a flow rate about 3% below spec on 2 of the 8 injectors, consistent with minor deposit buildup inside the injector tips. The premium truck's injectors all tested within 1% of spec, essentially like new. Before we move on, I also want to walk through how we set this test up, because the methodology matters if you want to trust these numbers. Both trucks were purchased new within the same week from the same dealership, same paint color, same options package. So we weren't dealing with 2 vehicles that came off the line with any meaningful manufacturing variance. We alternated drivers weekly between both trucks for the entire 50,000 miles. So no single driving style skewed either truck's results. Both trucks followed Ford's recommended severe duty oil change interval rather than the standard interval, specifically so that oil breakdown wouldn't become a confounding variable, hiding the fuel differences we were trying to isolate. Tire pressure was checked and matched weekly. Both trucks carried the same average load, and neither one towed anything heavier than a small utility trailer during the entire test, which matters for reasons I'll get into later. We also used the exact same fuel injector cleaner schedule, which was none at all, because we wanted the fuel itself to be the only variable affecting injector and valve condition, not an aftermarket additive masking the real differences. We also inspected the spark plugs at both the 25,000 and 50,000 mile marks, since spark plug condition can reveal a lot about combustion quality that the dyno numbers alone don't show. At 25,000 miles, both sets of plugs looked essentially normal, with a light tan color that indicates a healthy air-fuel mixture. By 50,000 miles, the plugs from the cheap gas truck showed slightly darker deposits on the electrode and insulator tip, consistent with marginally richer or less complete combustion, which lines up with the higher fuel dilution numbers we saw in the oil analysis. The premium truck's plugs still looked close to new, with clean, light-colored deposits. None of this was severe enough to cause a misfire or trigger a check engine light on either truck, but it's another data point that told the same story as everything else we measured: small but consistent degradation on the cheap, non-top-tier gas, and minimal change on the top-tier premium. If you're finding this useful so far, go ahead and hit that like button now, because the oil analysis results we're about to cover are honestly the most surprising part of this whole test, and I don't want you to miss it. We sent oil samples from both trucks to a lab at every oil change throughout the 50,000 miles, 6 samples per truck. This is where we expected the story to be more balanced, since oil quality and change intervals matter more than fuel grade for most wear metrics. And for the most part, that held true. Iron, copper, and aluminum wear metal levels were nearly identical between both trucks across every interval, which tells you that fuel grade alone doesn't meaningfully accelerate mechanical wear on bearings, rings, or the valve train when everything else is equal. What did differ was fuel dilution in the oil. The cheap gas truck consistently showed slightly higher fuel dilution readings, averaging around 2.8% compared to 2.1% on the premium truck. This isn't dangerous at these levels, but it does suggest that combustion on the cheap gas truck was marginally less complete, likely tied to that early carbon buildup starting to affect the burn quality slightly. It's a small effect, but a real one, and it lines up with everything else we found on the intake side. Now let's talk about power, because this is the number a lot of truck owners actually care about most. We ran both trucks on the same chassis dyno at the start of the test, at 25,000 miles, and again at 50,000 miles. At the start, both trucks produced essentially identical rear-wheel horsepower within the normal margin of error you'd expect between two supposedly identical vehicles. At 25,000 miles, the numbers were still nearly identical, with the cheap gas truck showing about a 2-horsepower deficit, which is genuinely within measurement noise and not something you'd ever feel behind the wheel. But at 50,000 miles, the gap widened to roughly a 7-horsepower deficit on the cheap gas truck, along with a slightly flatter torque curve in the mid-range. That's still not something most drivers would consciously notice day to day, but it's a measurable, repeatable difference, and it tracks directly with the carbon buildup we found on the intake valves, restricting airflow just enough to show up on the dyno chart. Here's where the surprise really comes in, and it's the part of this test that changed how I personally buy gas. We ran a second comparison that wasn't part of our original plan. Partway through the test, we found a top-tier certified station selling regular 87-octane fuel at a price nearly identical to the non-top-tier discount station. So we did a smaller side test, running a third F-150 for 10,000 miles exclusively on top-tier regular octane fuel, priced almost the same as the cheap gas in our main test. The results on that third truck matched the premium truck almost exactly. Clean valves on the bore scope, injector flow rates within spec, fuel dilution around 2.2%. In other words, the thing that actually mattered in this entire test was never the octane rating. It was whether the fuel met the top-tier detergent standard. You can pay premium prices for high-octane fuel that isn't top-tier and still get carbon buildup over time because octane and detergent additive levels are two completely separate things that just happen to often travel together at the same stations. And you can buy cheap 87 octane fuel and get all the protective benefit as long as you're buying it from a top-tier retailer. This matters because most drivers, myself included before this test, assume premium equals better in every sense. Premium equals higher octane, and higher octane equals cleaner burning, more protective fuel. None of that assumption held up under actual testing. The premium truck in our main comparison didn't win because it was premium. It won because it happened to be top tier. If we had run our cheap gas truck on a non-top tier premium fuel instead, I'd bet money the carbon buildup results would have looked almost identical to the cheap regular gas truck, just with a few extra points of octane doing nothing useful for a naturally aspirated engine that doesn't need it. So what does this actually mean for your wallet if you own an F-150 or any similar truck? Across 50,000 miles, the premium truck in our test cost roughly $1,400 more in fuel than the cheap gas truck, based on the average price difference between premium and regular during our test window. For that extra money, you got measurably cleaner valves, healthier injectors, and about 7 more horsepower at the wheel by the end of the test. That's a real benefit, but it's an expensive way to get it. The top-tier regular fuel in our side test delivered essentially the same protective benefit as full premium for close to the same price as the cheap, non-top-tier regular gas. Over 50,000 miles, that's a difference of well over $1,000 in your pocket for the same clean valves and healthy injectors you'd get from paying for premium. If you're driving a standard F-150 with the 5.0-liter V8 or the base EcoBoost, and it is not the Raptor or a high-output performance variant, you almost certainly do not need premium fuel for octane reasons. Check your owner's manual to confirm your specific engine's minimum octane requirement, because Ford will tell you directly what is actually required versus what is simply recommended for maximum output. What you should be checking instead is whether your regular gas station is top-tier certified. There is a full list of top-tier certified retailers published online, and it includes major chains like Costco, Shell, Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, and Quick Trip, alongside plenty of regional brands you might not expect. Many discount and no-name stations are not on that list, and that is exactly where the carbon buildup problem in our test came from. We also looked at the exhaust side of things, since carbon buildup and richer combustion can eventually affect emissions components too. At 50,000 miles, we pulled oxygen sensor data from both trucks using a scan tool and logged short-term and long-term fuel trims. The premium truck's trims sat close to zero across the board, which is exactly what you want to see, meaning the engine computer was not having to make significant adjustments to keep the air-fuel ratio correct. The cheap gas trucks' long-term fuel trims were running slightly positive in the range of 3 to 5%, which tells you the computer was already quietly compensating by adding a bit more fuel to make up for reduced airflow past those carbon deposits on the intake valves. Neither truck threw a fuel trim-related trouble code, and neither truck would have failed an emissions test at this point, but that positive trim is essentially an early warning sign. The exact kind of thing that, left unaddressed for another 50,000 or 100,000 miles, eventually turns into the rough, idle, and reduced fuel economy that shops see on high-mileage direct injection engines that have never run top-tier fuel. There is one more wrinkle worth mentioning because I do not want to oversimplify this. If you tow near your F-150's maximum rated capacity, especially in hot weather or at high altitude, there are real scenarios where a turbocharged EcoBoost engine can experience knock under extreme load, and the engine's knock sensor will automatically pull timing to protect itself, which does cost you some power and efficiency in that specific situation. In those conditions, premium fuel can provide a genuine, measurable benefit by giving the engine more octane headroom before knock sensors intervene. This was not the situation in our test since we drove a mix of highway and city miles without sustained heavy towing, but if you regularly tow at or near your truck's limit, premium fuel is worth considering not for the detergent but specifically for that knock protection under sustained heavy load. Putting all of this together, here is the actual takeaway from 50,000 miles and 2 torn-down engines. Octane rating by itself made almost no difference to fuel economy, power, or engine health on a standard F-150 not operating under extreme towing conditions. Detergent additive level, determined by whether your fuel is top-tier certified, made a real and measurable difference to carbon buildup, injector health, and even a small amount of horsepower over time. The cheapest way to protect your engine is not paying for premium at all. It is simply checking whether your regular gas station is on the top-tier list and switching if it is not. You get the same clean valves and healthy injectors as the premium truck in our test, without the extra $1,400 we spent over 50,000 miles to get there. I will be honest, I expected premium to win this test on the strength of octane alone, and I expected the difference to be bigger than it was. What actually happened is that the real winner was not premium fuel. It was top-tier fuel at whatever octane your truck actually needs, and for almost every F-150 on the road, that means regular. If you've been paying extra for premium out of habit or because you assumed it was protecting your engine, check your owner's manual for your actual octane requirement, then check whether your regular gas station is top-tier certified, and make the switch if it's not. Your engine gets the same protection, and you keep well over $1,000 in your pocket over the life of your truck. If this test changed how you think about what you're putting in your tank, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one, because we've got another long-term test running right now comparing synthetic and conventional oil in identical trucks, and those results are just as surprising as this one. Drop a comment and let me know which gas station you fill up at, and I'll tell you if it's actually top-tier certified. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.